When sewing, matching thread is important, usually. In this video, I'll show you how to match your thread to your chosen fabric, or not. Honestly, for many seams, if your machine is set correctly, the thread won't even show on your seam. However, it's always a good idea to get close enough when matching, just in case. And then there's the times when the thread is actually visible, like in top stitching or edge stitching. And then you may actually want to match your thread. So how best to match your thread? First, if you have a solid color fabric, ideally you want to find an exact match. Realistically, though, you'll find something close. And usually what happens is you'll be forced to pick between two shades of a similar color. Usually one's darker and one's lighter. So when this happens and you have two colors to pick from, pick the darker color. The lighter color will catch the light and be more visible. If you're stuck with a fabric that doesn't really even have an exact match, and you have, in this case, three colors, definitely don't pick the lighter one. That's going to really show up. And then you have the choice, in this case, I have the choice of these other two threads. And I could go with either one of these, kind of depending if I want to pull out the greenish color more or the slightly less green color. In my world of matching, either of these two will work and this one will not. So what happens if you have a fabric with a bunch of different colors in it? Well, if it's simply a fabric like this is with a print, you can always go with the main color of the background of the fabric, which in this case happens to be black. However, if it's a multicolored mess like this batik, then you have a few options. First thing I like to do is stand back and see what color it really reads. Does this read green, brown, or blue? In this case, I'm going to say it's probably brown or greenish, mostly. Then you can actually pick out colors that occur in it and see which ones go the best. So brown, green, blue, light colored tan, lighter green. In all cases, use a strand of thread off the spool just to see how it reacts on the fabric. When you sew, even if it's a top stitch or an edge stitch, you're only going to see one line of thread generally. And it'll look more like a single line of thread rather than an entire spool sitting on top of it. And I often pull my thread colors and eliminate them one by one as I go through. So in this case, I would eliminate this one because it's a little too light. I would eliminate this one probably because it feels a little too light as well. And this one, there isn't quite enough gold in here to really make this pull out. Now, if this was the only color I had on hand, you could totally sew the inside seams with this color. And if you were to top stitch with it, it'll just show up and kind of contrast but blend in some cases. So the real answer to the question is, which of these three colors goes? I could sew this fabric with any one of these. I would probably pick this green if I was just sewing it, and not the blue or the brown, but any one of them would go. So another thing to consider is if you're going to sew this fabric with another color. So say I'm going to pair it up with this color of blue. Maybe that will help you determine which color you really want to go with then. So if I was going to sew it with this blue, I would pick a blue thread. And if I wanted to sew it with green, I might pick the green thread. And if I was going to match it with a nice brown corduroy, I would go with the nice brown thread. And there's nothing that says you can't pick a contrasting color and just let it pop. So to recap, there's no real wrong answer to matching your thread, but there are some guidelines to choose a thread that will blend. Pick a color that matches the main color of your fabric. Pick a color that your fabric reads as if it's a multicolored fabric. And choose the darker of two threads if they're similar in color. It'll blend better. And you can choose not to blend your threads and let them contrast instead.